Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I want to say thank you on behalf of Mac to everyone that sent well wishes on him. He had a bit of a family emergency. He did want me to let everyone know that everything is fine on his end, and he will be back as soon as the Red Zone returns. Actually, I think the first week of September, we have some shows lined up on Wednesday that will preempt the Red Zone, but of course the Red Zone will be back. I mean, come on. Me and Mac have to make all those dick jokes. That's what you guys really come for. You don't want to hear the sports talk. You just want to hear the dick jokes. That being said, I think we have an interesting show tonight. I'm going to try to not look at the chat too much. I don't have Toussaint here with me helping out by putting certain comments on the screen. I'm going to try my best. Keep an eye out for it, but I know how angry you guys get when we start mixing up the terminologies. But today we're going to talk about my friend's new book, McManus. Sorry, that doesn't come out right. Liberal Socialism. In today's hyper-political climate, people often claim sharply defined political identities, with liberal frequently used as a pejorative in far left and socialist circles, rather than as a descriptor for those who align themselves with leftist ideals. This makes Matt McManus's choice of terminology in his latest book, Liberal Socialism, particularly provocative for many on the left. McManus challenges these rigid categorizations, can't talk right now, by exploring the potential synthesis of liberal and socialist principles. He argues that liberalism and socialism are not necessarily in conflict, but can instead complement each other in the pursuit of a more just society. This nuanced perspective invites readers to rethink the boundaries of leftist thought, pushing beyond the conventional disdain for liberalism in radical circles. As McManus writes in his book, to achieve a truly democratic society, we must embrace the best of both liberal and socialist traditions, recognizing that each has something vital to contribute to the fight against inequality and oppression. In this episode, we'll dive into McManus's arguments, examining why his concept of liberal socialism might be more relevant now more than ever, even if it raises eyebrows among those who consider themselves staunch socialists. Please welcome, coming all the way live from a hidden bunker somewhere in Detroit. I think he's at Eminem's house. Please welcome Matt McManus.
Oh, God.
I hope that was that a better introduction than what you got at Majority Report?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I was at Eminem's place, though. I mean, actually, no, I didn't like his new album all that much. So probably better than I'm not, right?
Okay. I haven't heard all of Eminem's record. I'm not going to sit here and lie like I'm listening to Eminem like I was in 99 and 2000. But
who is?
But somebody, he's still releasing records. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was at Coachella the year he was a headliner, and there was definitely a lot of people there for him. But what I did hear, the little snippets I did hear, is pretty good.
So the Houdini song is really, really good. And I'd say the last half of the album also pretty solid. First half, I don't know, man. It's just fucking like, look, I have a fucking came of age with Eminem, right?
Okay.
I mean, when I was working at McDonald's, we would fucking listen to Eminem. In high school, we listened to Eminem. By fucking junior high prom, we played Eminem, Real Slim Shady, right? So I'm a huge fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting there trying to hate on the guy. It's just my standard and expectations have been so raised so high, but a couple of his classic albums, it just didn't do it for me. I'm sorry.
As someone that's been listening to hip hop, the majority, I'll be 47 Monday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Don't look a day over 46.
I feel 59. I have to say, I thought Eminem has always been kind of on the forefront stylistically and lyrically, right? And then I think there's a moment where he's just was getting too a little too not weird. I just didn't care. Right.
That's kind of thing. I can't remember. Somebody in the fucking source said this. Anyway, if it's you, I'm not trying to plagiarize, but he said, nobody has gotten better at saying nothing really, really well than Eminem. And that's kind of the feel I get with his last couple of albums. It's very kind of insider baseball and complaining about reviews and complaining about Twitter feuds. He's complaining about like same old shit from his family or being a rich guy and, how he gets followed wherever he goes. And it all sounds really good. And like you said, technically without peer still, right? It's just, it lacks the kind of, the passion and the fire that you got in a couple of those first albums when he really seemed like he had something to say and he was also really good at saying it.
He had something to prove. He definitely had something to prove with that early stuff. But
absolutely,
there's a song he has, and he has this P. Diddy line, and the style he's flipping on it. I haven't heard anybody try to use it, and I was like, damn, that fool is still one of the most dangerous MCs, and you really don't want to mess with Shady.
Yeah. No, exactly. I remember fucking when Machine Gun Kelly tried to do that whole beef with him, and he's like, I'm the future. I'm like, man, why the fuck are you even doing this? And then Eminem just like dissed back, and he's like, listen, this is your 15 minutes because you got my attention. Enjoy it because it's the only chance you're gonna have to make any kind of money. And I was like, God damn, he's absolutely right. And,
like he Andy Williams says Eminem liberal social. Thank you very much, Carl Shepard. We're going to be doing a special stream for my birthday, Monday, August 19th. I'll be with you people, not having fun. 8 Mile was a great movie, I thought.
It was. The weird thing is, I first watched that with my cousins at my grandpa's house, and my grandpa I love the guy, but he was a really conservative guy. I don't think if he had heard half the people talking in that movie, he'd be like, what in the world is that, right? But my cousin was like, did he actually go through this shit? I was like, I don't know, but if he did, then it makes me really respect the guy a lot more, because however hard you think your life is, it seems like Eminem's was a lot fucking harder. That's for sure.
8 Mile, like there's scenes in 8 Mile. I don't know if you know this. The rap battle scenes are all lip sync.
Really?
So yeah, that's not happening live. They lip synced it, right? And so there's scenes where he's supposed to be battling other rappers, and you can find this on YouTube. I think it was like an extra thing for the DVD of 8 Mile, and so Eminem came up in the rap battle scene at like the hip hop Olympics and stuff like that, which I'm sure people watching this show have no idea what I'm talking about, but it was a thing that used to happen back in the 90s. So we knew about Eminem before Dre had signed him. He was like a name in the hip hop world.
You knew about him?
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, he had got to the Bay. Oh yeah. People in the Bay definitely knew about him. California. Yeah. And so Eminem's not afraid to take people on. Like there's a few rappers out there that, like, there's a great video of Common walking down the street and he sees this dude freestyling, and he's like so taken by this dude freestyling. He's like, do you want to freestyle? Give me the mic. And he just starts rapping with the dude. Like, say what you will about Common, I do appreciate that about him, that he really does just love hip hop.
Yeah.
Eminem seems to be the same way. So because it's all staged. So Eminem says a line, and the director goes, "Okay, now we want you to yell," and the other guy says lines like, "Okay, we want you to boo." So I think they actually mic'd him though, and so the other guy that was supposed to be just moving his mouth started battling Eminem.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is my opportunity. I'm gonna throw my shot at Slim Shady, and Eminem was like, and he's the movie's about him. He's got a movie out, so he's a star at this point. He doesn't have to do anything. He could just be like, oh, I'm being like whatever. He battled the dude and ate him.
Really?
He ate him up.
Well,
It's like you don't want to fuck with Shady.
well, yeah, that's why you don't fuck with them, right? I mean, some people have better sense than that. Like I fucking so I was obsessed for a little while with Kendrick Lamar Drake beef. Because it's kind of weird, I came from Toronto, so I was really deep into Drake for a little while, but I hate the guy, so I was like Team Kendrick the whole time. I just remember like Cole initially tried to like get in on all that, and then he just like bowed out immediately, being like, I'm not touching all that.
No.
And then they went at each other, and but like you should come to Detroit, man. Like everywhere you go, like Night Like Us is just blasting 24/7. And I was like, how shitty must your life be if you're Drake right now? Just going all around the world, and people are just playing that everywhere you go.
That's a good way for us to bring back the book. You talk about Drake
Yeah.
in your introduction.
I do. Yeah, I did.
How Canadian can you be when you got to talk about Drake in your introduction? Can you talk a little bit about how you brought Drake up in your book about liberals?
That's when I started fucking hating the guy, right? Because like, well, I hate is too strong word. I like some of his songs, but like everybody in Toronto knew who Drake was, right? And that whole started from the bottom, now we hear song. Anybody who knows anything about Drake knows that he did not start at the bottom. In fact, he started pretty damn close to the top, right? The kind of line we used to sing was, started on Degrassi, now I'm here. And so that's when I started to sour on the guy a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't hit the same way.
No, exactly, right? I mean, when you're fucking a teenager and you're on a hit show making a couple $1 million a year, I mean, if that's a fucking bottom, then sign me up for it, right?
I thought you guys have different bottoms in Canada. That's what it is.
That's a good
and you are from Toronto as well, too, right?
I grew up in a small town near Ottawa. It was called Stittsville, Ontario. Once it's a small town, now it's kind of just a suburb of Ottawa. But I came from Toronto. I did my PhD in Toronto. Like Toronto a lot. What can I say?
I think this is my Canada week on the show, because I had One Dime, who's from Toronto area. I had the Dreg, who's from Ottawa, and now I have you. So this is Canada week.
Well, people don't know this, but we're taking over slowly but surely, right? First, we're gonna get into the music business, then we're gonna get in the government, and you're gonna wake up one day, and from Mexico City through New York all the way to Toronto, you're gonna see the maple leaf flying over you, and we'll all be the better for it.
As long as you guys redo McDonald's in the States to look like McDonald's in Canada, because McDonald's in Canada is so much nicer.
It is, yeah, and especially now. They've like refurbished everything, and you'll go in, and they got like those TVs where you put your thing in. And like I said, I worked at McDonald's for a little while. I'm like, what the fuck is this, right? When I was working here, you just got some drunk guy who came and yelled things at you, and you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, man. And he's like, fuck you, get me my fucking McChicken. You're like, okay, McChicken. Now you go and you press the little buttons in, and
you just hand it, you just put it out. Yeah, no, it's a whole different. It's a whole new world.
I know, and I was like, man, this is just so bougie, right? I almost feel like I should be spending money just by standing there. Like, it's so fucking nice.
Well, let's pivot to this book you wrote, which is I want to say, would you say this is your life's work so far? Is this book this thesis?
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope I'll write a better book than this one someday, and I want to be clear to people. This isn't my own kind of defense of liberal socialism in the sense that I'm kind of offering philosophical arguments that are unique to me for it. Instead, this is what I call a retrieval, drawing upon the great Canadian political philosopher C.B. Macpherson, right? So I'm recovering a tradition that was lost and kind of presenting its core figures. But yeah, no, I was really passionate about it. I think that liberal socialism is a viable and worthwhile tradition that's worth retrieving. And I hope that people who read the book will recognize that there are worthwhile parts to it, even though, as I point out at the end, there are a lot of things that were wrong with liberal socialism in its heyday, and there are a lot of things that are wrong with it right now. And those of us who want to carry forward the tradition need to fix those mistakes.
Well, let's get to the first talking point. And, look, you're here with me. We have at least another 45 minutes.
Mhm.
You don't have to answer so quickly.
Yeah.
I'm fucking with you. In liberal socialism, you propose a synthesis between liberalism and socialism, arguing that both traditions share a commitment to justice and equality. How do you reconcile the tensions between liberal individualism and socialist collectivism in this framework? Quote from the book: liberal socialism is an attempt to preserve the moral core of liberalism, its respect for individual freedom and autonomy, while addressing the inequalities and systemic injustices that are often left unchallenged by liberal thought.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really leads to really the philosophical heart of the book, which is this tension between the needs of the many and the needs of the one, as it were. So, one of the points that I make in the book is that, without a doubt, earlier forms of liberalism, what we might call classical liberalism, or to follow C.B. Macpherson, possessive individualist liberalism, were committed to this extremely individualist outlook on society and on human nature, for that matter. So, people like Hobbes or Locke, certainly on Macpherson's reading, posited a view of society as consisting of discrete individuals, each of whom was a kind of world unto themselves, and everybody pursued their self-interest in the state of nature, and tried to grab as much as they could for themselves without really too much regard for anyone else. And Macpherson kind of very nicely characterizes this as a commitment to an acquisitive ethic, right? This idea that the point of human life is just to acquire as much stuff as I possibly can, even if that's the expense of everyone else. And I make very clear in the book that no leftist is ever going to have any kind of truck with that position, nor should they, right? It's
Mhm.
a very alienating, exploitative, and anti-egalitarian outlook in some ways that we can get into. But what I point out later on in the book is that we shouldn't take this kind of possessive individualist variant of liberalism to exhaust the liberal tradition. There are a lot of versions of liberalism that were very critical of this outlook. So, just to give one example that some of your American listeners might find a little bit interesting. So, Thomas Paine, right? Thomas Paine was one of the great polemicists for the American Revolution and the French Revolution. He liked his revolutions, right? So, in an American context, he wrote a famous pamphlet called Common Sense that people like George Washington would read out to their soldiers before they went to battle. And Common Sense is a great read, right? It's very funny and it mocks the aristocracy of Europe. But for the most part, in terms of the content of Common Sense, it's pretty classical liberal in its orientation, right? Arguing for natural rights, representative government, a la the USA, et cetera, et cetera. But let's flash forward a little bit, right, to Paine's next really big book, The Rights of Man. Well, particularly in parts two of The Rights of Man, uh, Paine says something like private property, for example, isn't an institution or isn't a right that individuals have, certainly just as individuals. Paine says, look, private property is a social phenomenon. And the reason this is important for Paine is the rich who have a lot of property owe a debt to society for being able to accumulate this much property. And the way they can pay that debt off is by redistributing an awful lot of their wealth down to the poor, because without the benefits of society, they would never be able to have accumulated this much in the first place. So Paine is a revolutionary liberal and Republican who's one of the first to argue for what we might now call a welfare state, quite a generous welfare state in the 18th century. And he really set the stage for inspiring a large number of egalitarian and radical liberals, and of course, socialists thereafter. And I use him and others like him as an example to show liberalism does not have to be committed to this very crude, possessive, acquisitive individualism. It can be committed to this idea that, to use, the Kamala term, we live in a society. We didn't fall out of a coconut tree, and we owe debts to society and to others for the benefits that we accrue from society. So, what I argue in the book is that liberal socialists should be committed to what I call methodological collectivism and normative individualism. Now, those are pretty technical terms, but what I just mean by this is we're methodological collectivists in the sense that we recognize that we live in a society and that a huge amount of human flourishing is dependent not just on the people around us, but the social structures that we inhabit, including economic structures, which can very often be domineering. But we're normative individualists in the sense that we think that ultimately what's important is the flourishing of each individual. And I really do mean each individual equally, right? And the reason why I think it's important to be committed to normative individualism is like Marx, right, we want to be committed to actual individual people and their well-being. We don't want to hypothesize about the well-being of abstractions like the nation over and above the individuals and say that's what we're committed to trying to better, right? So this commitment to methodological collectivism and normative individualism is what I take to be one of the core principles that defines liberal socialism, and contrast it with something like classical liberalism.
Say it again. Just kidding.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That was the slowest I've heard you. That was the slowest I've heard you talk. You must be comfortable.
No, I'm fucking tired is what I am. I've been marking a lot of essays today. So fucking, you're getting me on the downward swing a little bit.
Usually I was thinking, oh God, Matt's on the show, dude. He talks so fast. How are we gonna do this? He can't Shapiro me.
Fuck it. And people tell me that so often too. The number one thing my wife always tells me, she's like, why do you gotta talk so goddamn fast with me? Right? I'm married to you. We can have a conversation. You can be slow. And I'm like, it's just built into me, right? I just can't fucking help it. And I'm like, look, one day when I have a stroke and I'm fucking lying there, then I'll talk slow to you. And
that's
then,
how we'll know.
That's how you'll know.
Like,
exactly.
Oh shit! Did you hear that? He's stroking out.
Exactly. Right. Talking at a normal pace.
The role of the state. Your work suggests that the state has a crucial role in promoting social justice within the liberal socialist framework. Mm-hmm. How do you envision the state balancing its regulatory functions with the need to protect individual freedoms? You write in the book, the state under liberal socialism must be both the grantor of individual rights and the agent of collective welfare, ensuring that neither the market nor private power structures undermine the freedom and dignity of the least advantaged. I think you were kind of getting into that a little bit with the last answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So one of the things that I point out is that liberals, like socialists, really divide on the role that the state is supposed to play. And that includes stark divisions between classical liberals and liberal socialists. So let's just take classical liberals, for example. So James Madison, I pointed this out in my interview today, usually taken to be a canonical classical liberal, also writes in Federalist 10 a lot like a Marxist in the sense that he says, look, society is always going to be divided into different factions. That's just a truth of human nature that we've seen forever in human society. These factions are primarily going to be defined by economic inequities in the sense that they're going to be rich and poor. And the state, to the extent that it can, should manage the interests of society in favor of the rich. So, like I said, kind of like a Marxist, except he thinks that the capitalist should win, right? It should serve as the executive branch in the interest of the bourgeoisie, right? And very clearly, right, liberal socialists are not going to accept that classical liberal view of the state as guaranteeing things like expansive private property rights and the right to exploit workers to nearly the same extent. Instead, liberal socialists follow people like John Stuart Mill or John Rawls, the two Johns, as I've taken to calling them, or the great black radical liberal Charles Mills, and saying the goal of the liberal socialist state should be to fulfill several functions, but a core amongst them should be looking after the least well-off and organizing the economy so that the least well-off are the primary beneficiaries of any economic policies that we introduce, and just as important, trying to secure the democratization of the workplace through things like instituting liberal rights in the workplace and also ensuring that basically bosses are accountable to their workers, potentially even by making them elected or better yet, just eliminating bosses and having workers manage firms themselves. So that's obviously going to require quite a bit of state intervention in the way the economy operates right now. But it's not unprecedented, right? If you think about things like co-determination models in Europe or, creating institutional structures to facilitate the emergence of things like cooperatives, which are different kinds of policies that I say liberal socialists should try to implement in the United States and further abroad.
So are you part of the Richard Wolff, everything should be a co-op model?
Hey, I would love it, right? Look, I'm not 100% sure that co-ops are appropriate in every single fucking circumstance, right? Mm-hmm. If your daughter decides to set up a lemonade stand and she hires, her little brother and two others, then by all means she can be the boss, right? This is where I think we have to look at the situation empirically and say that past a certain threshold, it's beneficiary both to workers and to society as a whole, for economic power in firms to be democratized to the extent possible, and for workers to possess an expansive amount of rights in the workplace. What the threshold is, not sure. Again, I'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But this has been pretty central to a lot of socialism, going all the way back to the 19th century, right? Where most socialists would say, look, personal property is something that should be protected, right? Your house, your car, your, the nice posters you got in your background right there, maybe my books and all that shit. And, many socialists would say, small businesses aren't really what we're going after at this point. It's the commanding heights of the economy, or the means of production, which are what need to be socialized. And I would say that the same is true for liberal socialists when we call for the democratization of large economic firms.
How has this book been going over with? I know it's pretty brand new. Is it even out yet?
It's coming out in November.
Yeah, so it's not even out yet. But how has the reception been? I know you're slowly making the rounds now. Media tours with books are a little different in the internet age.
Yeah.
How and I said it in the introduction, and that was the first thing I thought as I opened the book and read your wife's forward. My first thought was,
which, by the way, as she's listening, best part of the book, 100%, right? It's the whole reason to buy the book. Everything that comes afterwards is just fucking.
She called out. She goes, look, if you don't want to read all the filler in this motherfucker, just skip the part.
Just read that. It's 8 pages, and
just read it. Skip the part about Marx. It's like Jay. It's like she was sending me a message. Jay, look, it's like 340 pages. Really, you don't have time.
Yeah. Time for that.
So tell her I said thank you.
I will.
But seriously, in this moment that we live in, I just had these two younger people from your side of Canada on that kind of talk about these extremely niche political ideologies that we see younger people being a part of, where it's just a lot of people that are an army of one. Also, you see a lot of younger people love generational conversations, and it's almost like they don't understand that generational conversations, even as much as identity conversations, all comes from branding and marketing. And it's like everyone's trying to figure out what your market niche is and how it differs from their market niche before anyone can even listen to anything you have to say. So, who's giving you the most backlash? Is it coming from a younger crowd or older crowd, or all of the above? Are you getting any backlash at all? Are people receptive to this idea? Or is liberal in the world that we kind of exist in still a bit of a pejorative?
Oh, I'd say it's definitely still a bit of a pejorative. And look, I can understand why, right? I mean, I always joke with our mutual buddy, Ben Burgess, right? That before I moved to the United States, I had no idea why so many American leftists just use the word liberal with such visceral hatred. And then I moved here and I realized that there's just a kind of centrist personality that basically thinks that what an upper middle class New Yorker imagines to be the right thing to do is the universal morality for all humankind, and anything that deviates from that is just bizarre. And I was like, oh, I get it now. I really do. These people are really annoying, and they have no imagination, and they also have no fucking idea how hard it is for some people, and why the moral values of an upper middle class New Yorker might not be shared by everyone. But in terms of like the book's broader reception, I'm actually fairly happy with it. Not because everyone's liked the book, but precisely because it seems to have actually provoked a reasonable amount of controversy, right? I've had, a lot of ultra Marxist and kind of, hard left people say, what a fucking shitty idea. How dare you do this? Or this is just reformism or generic social democracy, et cetera, et cetera. But I've also had a couple who've reached out to me being like, look, it's an interesting idea. We're not sold yet, but we're open to hearing a little bit more about that. And those are the kind of dialogues I like because they're fruitful. And even if you don't always come away agreeing with one another, you usually learn a little bit from them. Now, on the most interesting response I have to say, though, is, which kind of disturbs me, is on the opposite end of the political spectrum, because they're kind of center-right people who are, without a doubt, the most visceral opponents of the book. These are the kinds of people who are still, ride or die with Reagan, and they'll say,
Gotcha.
fucking liberal socialism, what a fucking travesty. We can't stand this. Hayek would be rolling around in his grave. But then you get to the far right, and some people on the far right where, yeah, that's what we've been saying forever, right? Liberals, socialists, all the same. And that's disturbed me a little bit, although I've written on the political right quite extensively, as you know, so didn't exactly surprise me, right? But this variety of reactions does encourage me to think that, I'm onto something, and at the very least, it looks like people are interested in the book. And what else could an author really want, right?
If you called it anything else, a more democratic socialism, do you think that would have went over better, or do you care?
I do care, and the reason I care is a big motivation behind writing this book was I did want to argue to my fellow leftists that there are many features of the liberal tradition that are worth saving. And the label was important to that because if I'd used something else, then the message might not have gone over as clearly, right? So when I talk to most leftists and I ask them, like, look, do you believe that everyone should have a right to vote? Almost all of them will say, absolutely. What a fucking dumb question. Of course, we believe everyone should have the right to vote. I ask them, do you believe in things like freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of association, particularly for political movements? They'll go, yes. If anything, the big problem is that we don't think those rights are safe in the hands of the liberal state, let alone the reactionary state. And there are some good reasons to be reserved about that. But when you run through the list like this, I kind of am like, look, so a lot of us are committed to many of the basic liberal rights. If anything, we want to be more militant in defending them than a lot of centrist liberals who are willing to trade them away for protections of things like private property. The big difference, of course, between liberal socialists and classical liberals is around the idea of private property, right? Classical liberals treat private property to be one of, if not the most important of the liberal rights that need to be defended. And sometimes they're very express about this, right? Ludwig von Mises, fascist apologist and self-identified liberal, once said, all the liberal rights basically flow from this right to private property and are kind of downstream of it. And liberal socialists would, of course, disagree with that. They'd say, again, that a right to personal property is, of course, extremely important. Nobody wants the state coming in and booting you out of your house or taking your car for no goddamn good reason or whatever. But the commanding heights of the economy, the modes of production or the forces of production, those should be socialized because allowing private industry to own the means of production or the commanding heights of economy creates extraordinary distortions of power in society that are antithetical to equal citizenship and the flourishing of all. And we can't have that very much longer.
I agree. I can't disagree with that. I just can't. In your critique of neoliberalism, you argue that it has failed to deliver on its promises of freedom and prosperity for all. How does liberal socialism offer a more viable alternative, especially in the context of rising economic inequality? In the book you write, neoliberalism's emphasis on unfettered markets has led to the erosion of democratic institutions and the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. Liberal socialism seeks to rectify these imbalances by reasserting the primacy of democratic control over economic life.
Yeah, it's one of the main arguments that I make in this book, right? So neoliberalism is really the main villain or the final boss of liberal socialism, precisely because many liberal socialists, including people like Rawls or Charles Mills, would say that neoliberalism is a bastardization of liberalism. It clearly emerges from the liberal tradition, but it embodies many of its worst propensities, right? And I'm not the only one saying this, by the way. I'm very clear about Samuel Moyne, the great historian, was a huge influence on the book with his discussion of Cold War liberalism. So the way I describe it is neoliberalism was an uninspiring ideology that delivered an even more uninspiring society. And, part of this is based on personal experience, right? You and I grew up in the era of the so-called end of history period, defined by capitalist realism, where we were told there just was no alternative to the neoliberal epoch. And thank God the end of history only ended up lasting about 25 years or so. And we've entered into a new time frame where political possibilities and economic possibilities are more open, which is exciting. But it's also terrifying when you think about how things like Trumpism or Orbanism or Modiism are emerging. And one of the points that I stress in this book is many neoliberals claim to be dissatisfied with Trumpism or Orbanism or Modiism, seeing it as a distortion of their basic principles. But what I try to argue in the book is no, actually, Trump is in many ways the ultimate product of the neoliberal epoch, with a lot of reactionary and conservative vitriol kind of baked in there as well. Because think about who Donald Trump is, right? He is somebody who fundamentally believes that the world divides into winners and losers. The people who've won did so through their own merits because they weren't part of, to use his term, the lucky sperm club, and they owe nothing to the people at the bottom. And consequently, the people who are at the bottom are losers, right? And losers in the worst sense, because from this neoliberal standpoint that really emphasizes things like meritocratic mythologies, they deserve to be where they are because they were lazy, talentless, and didn't contribute anything. And following people like Moyne and Sandel and Wendy Brown, I point out it's hard to think of a more toxic kind of political environment or a less admirable ruling class than one that feels it owes nothing to the people at the bottom and is trying to convince many of the people at the bottom that they are responsible for their own domination because they don't deserve to be any higher. And I think it's no surprise that this couldn't last forever. And I'm don't want to say optimistic, but I am hopeful that we're going to see something better replacing it.
But do you think we live in a moment of neoliberal realism where we really can't see beyond the system?
Not anymore, right? This is kind of what I was getting at a few minutes ago, right? I think that post 2008 and definitely post 2016, we've entered into an era where neoliberalism is being confronted as never before, and many people are losing faith in it. And on the one hand, there's something that's exciting about this because it opens up new political possibilities for more radical kinds of politics and more substantive kind of transformations in the direction of economic democracy and in the direction of securing a society where everyone's flourishing is guaranteed to the extent possible. But it also opens up the possibility of very, very noxious forms and often very evil forms of reaction. And we've seen that over the last decade as well, right? I mean, one of the things that I constantly implore leftists to think about is for a very long time, we consistently thought of liberals as being the worst thing that ever was. And I spent a lot of my time studying the right then as now, and I always insist, no, there are far worse things out there, even than classical liberalism, right? Just look at, some of the kind of crap that emerges on Twitter or in Hungary or in India right now. And that's why this is an era of enormous possibilities, but also enormous dangers. And I'm not really sure how things are going to play out. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I can't tell you.
Yeah. And there's no way in the world that if I told you in 2020 that in 2024 Kamala Harris would be running, you would have looked at me like I was crazy. I would have looked at you like you were crazy.
I will say this, like, Jason, you'll pass that shit, right? Well, whatever you're on, I want to fucking taste it, right? Especially 2020 during COVID, I'd be like, I gotta get away from my problems, man. Like, let's be a good guy.
I would. What's funny is I have been saying for the last 2 years at least that I think Trump had his Chinese democracy moment, January 6th. And Chinese democracy being the failed Guns N' Roses record that took.
I listened to it, and
not very good.
No,
it's not good.
I didn't even get a Dr. Pepper from it. I was really fucking pissed off about that.
Oh, dude, I was so excited for. By the time Slash left, there was nothing for that band that I cared to hear. And no shade at people like Buckethead, who's an extremely good guitar player that played in that band. But anyway, I didn't think he really had it. And I think we're seeing it. I said this on another show that, after the assassination attempt, I think a lot of people were like, uh-oh. Yeah. Because there was the debate and the assassination attempt happened. Everyone was like, oh, no, I think we're going to see another for Trump. And then it doesn't take much for the wind to be out of those sails. It just took the announcement of a woman that was extremely unpopular when she ran for office and has been an extremely unpopular vice president, is now breaking records, raising money. So that's why I asked the question, are we really over neoliberalism when, for example, we're still having the same identity battles.
Yeah.
We're still looking at solutions to poverty through either the foundation world or through some sort of racial democratic or incentive, right? I just wrote this paper that'll be coming out for our Patreon about why I hate AAVE, and reading about how it was they were trying to implement it in the Oakland Unified School District was never going to address the real issues within that city and that school district. But it was a nice liberal veneer that was it seemed antithetical to the solutions that we were doing in the 90s, which was just lock everybody up and suspend all the kids. And that was in the 90s. And here we are 30 years later, after we already know about the folly of mass incarceration. And all I'm hearing from even Democratic mayors and governors and city council members is we need to lock people up for longer periods of time.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things that I'm really worried about when it comes to a potential Kamala presidency. So I think that there are two things to say about this, right? The first one is that I am more optimistic about the future, in part because I think that a lot of the media made two mistakes when it came to how they presented Trump. The first mistake in 2016 and the big mistake was to just treat him as a clown who could never cause any damage. Right? They
100% agree.
profoundly underestimated his political instincts, and they paid a price for that. We all did, right? I mean, fucking, who would have thought in 2015, by 2020, we'd have a fucking president sitting there being like, "Hey, why don't we try injecting bleach into your veins?" That might fucking do some shit, right?
Yeah.
Give it a try. But on the other hand, I think that the media since 2016 has over-responded by treating Trump and a lot of the cronies that he surrounds himself with like dark geniuses who have these bizarre or almost transcendent political instincts and are consequently destined to world historical greatness, which is, of course, what Trump and his cronies want people to think. And my response to that is no. If you look at Trump, he's always been extremely unpopular in many respects, right? Yes, he has a very large fan base, and that's not to be underestimated.
Yeah.
But he's lost the popular vote in both elections that he ran in. He lost two midterms in a row, and poll after poll showed that most Americans don't have a high opinion about the guy, and there's not really a lot of room for him to grow in 2024. I mean, at this point, fucking, wouldn't most of us just want more than anything to be able to never have to hear about Donald Trump again, and not to have every fucking moment of the day monopolized by him trying to make everything in the world about him, right? So in that respect, I'm not that surprised that you put a candidate who's not new to politics, but somewhat fresher than Joe Biden. And people are just like, well, fucking, at least she's got something new going for her, right?
And no one really understands her political record because she didn't really have a position where there's going to be a record, right? She was a senator for a short time. I think she was an AG.
Absolutely. And this is where I think the danger comes in, right? So a lot of people are talking about Kamala, as writing something like a Barack Obama kind of moment. But my friend Luke Savage, who writes for Jacobin and is also Canadian, right? So, like I said, day of Canadian content, wrote one of the sharpest critiques of Obamism that I know, which is that Obama was very gifted at making mercurial or centrist platitudes sound like grandstanding progressive transformation. That was what his real gift was. And I think Luke is right about that. And I also think that's right that Kamala is trying and looks like succeeding, at least to some extent right now, at pulling off a similar trick, right? Allowing herself to be kind of an empty vessel into which progressives can project all their expectations, all their hopes, and also all their fears. And I will say this, I do think she would be better president than Trump, but I mean, who fucking wouldn't be, right? Fucking get my cat in the White House and he'd fucking do a better job of it, right? So that's really the kind of danger, right? That she's going to be able to capture a lot of progressive energy, a lot of progressive hopes in the same way that Obama did in 2008. And hey, I was young when he ran for office and I was caught up in that also, right? So it happens. And then, in office, like you said, she's just going to carry on with the same old politics of the Biden administration, of the Obama administration, and nothing fundamental is going to change, which I think would be a serious mistake, because I will leave the door open for the resurgence of something, not necessarily like Trumpism, because I think Trump will be too old, but a kind of continuation of MAGA politics.
Do you think? Here's a question I'm sure you don't get. I'm a little older than you, and I grew up with 12 years of GOP rule. 8 years of Reagan, and then 4 years of Bush Sr. Then there was 8 years of Clinton, then 8 years of Bush Jr., 8 years of Obama, and now we're ping-ponging. We're in a hyper-political moment where everything seems political, but then nothing is really political, right? Especially even the way people are talking about Kamala and Trump and even these elections. No one's really talking about real issues like maybe the border, right? I live not far from the border. I don't know where people are getting all this information about all these quote unquote Mexicans running up and down the border. They're snipers, and I can see them. I've seen them. You will get shot. That wall was strategically built. So usually people die on their way there. I have heard in my almost 3 years living here in Mexico, horror stories of people dealing with coyotes to try to get over. The Remain in Mexico policy pretty much stayed. All that was changed up, and this changed up kind of while Trump was still in office, was the kids in cages situation. And nobody really cares about the mass amount of Guatemalans and Hondurans that are kind of stuck in a place that they don't want to be. And I think that may be the one issue, and that issue does have bipartisan support. But it feels like the issues that we cared about in 2020, rogue law enforcement, homelessness and housing, student debt getting out of control, and the pretty much the neoliberalization of the education of higher ed, all that has gone by the wayside, I feel. And in the hyper political moment, all we want to do is watch pundits call balls and strikes on who said what at what press conference. How can we even get to having a serious conversation about liberal socialism, or even any kind of like democratic socialist reforms, when we're constantly kind of stuck in this loop of the allure of the political burlesque that plays out? That is, at this point, it feels like it's more popular than reality TV.
Yeah, absolutely. So seems like forever ago, but back in 2018 through about 2021, 2022, I wrote a lot about the condition of postmodernity, this kind of hyper-real atmosphere that we're all part of, where politics really is treated like a sport, right? Where people invest it with this kind of hyper-partisan energy, but they don't really think very much about the real-world impact of their preferences on actual people. And this is where I got really frustrated, right? Because I was living in Mexico during the early days of the Trump administration. And when I saw the talking heads go at one another on CNN about the border, I was like, do you realize that these are fucking real people who have lives and children and hopes and dreams and aspirations? And when you treat them like toys that you can manipulate to try to score cheap points in audio-visual medias, that's just a disgusting and really vulgar kind of enterprise. But in terms of what we can do to fix that, I think that it's going to require enormous cultural, technological, and political changes. And it's too broad a conversation to have right here. But the number one thing that I reached, that I concluded through all my researches, was that what defines the kind of contemporary era is this kind of Mark Fisher-esque view that there really is no alternative to the status quo that we have right now, that this is the best that we can do. And when people feel that way, of course, they're not going to take politics seriously in the sense of projecting transformative hopes onto it, but they will take it seriously as a kind of spectacle, right? Because it's entertainment, and entertainment is what we look for. So I think that restoring the level of ideological seriousness to politics that you are calling for will mean restoring a sense of hope that things can change and that they can get better. Because it's only when people think that things can get better that they start asking themselves things like, well, what would better look like, right? What alternative should we embrace? Should we go for a more democratic socialist, liberal socialist, Marxist kind of route? And I mean, I welcome those kinds of conversations because I think it would be a sign that we'd entered into a more healthy cultural space than we have right now.
I would love that moment, but you know, I was out in the world talking to a real person that's not
Yeah.
that's not plugged in online,
Yeah.
and good dude, and somehow we got talking about there's always talk here of the fear of the orange man becoming president and what's going to happen. And since I've been here, again, I've only been here 3 years, I've seen the population grow, and I've seen houses. There's probably been like 10 houses built in my area since I've been here.
Nice.
So there are a lot of people, you can't afford the States, right? It's very expensive. And if you're a retiree on a fixed income, it's really hard. So I get why people are moving down here.
Hey, you don't need to fucking tell me. One of my students asked me, like, where do you live? They're like, I live in my apartment. They're like, you can't afford a house. And I'm like, fucking, the only piece of private property I'm going to afford is going to be my coffin when they fucking bury me in it. And even there, I'm probably going to fucking start like a GoFundMe a couple of days before my death. It's like, hey, I'm going to die soon. I'd like to have some place where I'm buried so my family can come visit me. So donate to your boy.
But that's the reality, right? I know too many people that have had to do GoFundMes for their chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of understand that, but there is this kind of fear, though, that, to Fisher's point, everything is kind of fake. It's like we understand it's kayfabe, we understand it's pro wrestling, but we're still addicted to the pro wrestling because we love the drama. We love soap operas. And he was telling me that he believed that the Trump assassination attempt was fake. And I said, check this out. You know what's scarier than it being fake? Ineptitude. Stop thinking that every Secret Service agent is Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you know that we're no longer in Afghanistan. Like, it's not these movies that you've been watching for the last 30 years where there's just a kind of a wizard behind the scenes constantly pulling strings and an alphabet organization that's making everything happen. Like, there's ineptitude in the US government. And it seems like that's hard for people to understand.
Well, I think this is an idea that really occurred to me during the COVID administration. I'm not the only one who came up with this, right? A lot of people talk about the appeal of conspiracy theories, and they're different kind of psychological metrics that make people more susceptible to conspiracy theories. One is narcissism, right? Both because people like to think that they've cracked the code of how the world works, but also because narcissism is also associated very heavily with paranoia, right? This belief that everyone really is paying attention to you and everyone really is out to get you because you're the center of the world, right? But I took a somewhat different view than that. I think that conspiracy theories are in many ways a lot more comforting than dealing with reality.
Agreed.
Because in a conspiracy theory, everything really is controlled. There is somebody who has their hand on the lever, who's manipulating absolutely everything. And if you can get rid of them and put your hand on the lever, everything will go back to normal, right? But there's this view that the world really is an orderly place. It's just ordered by dark and mysterious forces. The hard material reality, and this is a nice Marxist point, of the world, is that very often we have little control over how things operate. Sometimes the world really is just a mess, and the best we can do is make the best of it, right? And I think for a lot of people, that's a very, very difficult thing to acknowledge, because who likes to face the reality that we are natural creatures, we are physical and material beings, and that means we are subject to the material chaos that surrounds so much of us. It's a hard thing to accept, and conspiracy theories offset that by saying, actually, everybody, it really is, the whole world really is run by human beings. They might be bad human beings, but you can at least sleep with the knowledge that you've cracked the code and know the fundamental order of the universe.
Yeah, I guess you're onto something, but how do you, how can I put this? I know it's getting late. How can I put this? It feels like people, okay, I agree with your code cracking point, right? I cracked the code. I figured it all out. It's all about this. And it's all about the money. Follow the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Follow what money? Tell me what to follow. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, what did, I can't remember who said this. It might have been Adorno or Walter Benjamin, one of those guys, right? But he said, anti-Semitism is a very, very poor man's structural critique, precisely because it projects onto individuals and groups in a very racist way. And I'd say this is true of a lot of racist conspiracy theories, right? Control over events that are really the result of systemic features of the human world that we have very little understanding of and very little control of right now. And of course, the Marxist point is that the only way to really get rid of conspiracy theories is to rationally take control of our social life and apprehend it the way that it is. Because when you do that, you realize that it's not some invisible or tyrannical group that's got their hands on the lever. Really, it is the alienated social institutions and practices that we have erected over us that are controlling us, that we need to get rid of if we're going to lead truly free and flourishing lives.
I'm mad that you remembered that. Do they have SATs in Canada?
No, they don't. The reason I said that, and this is going to be my own fucking internet thing, is some people are giving me shit for some things I said about Marxism on Twitter today. So for those of you who were giving me shit, right, there's a little Marxist theory for you. Right?
What were they? They said you didn't understand Marx.
Oh, I got into some argument with a guy where he was like, do you believe in the labor theory of value? And I was like, no, I don't. He's like, you believe in the labor theory of value? I'm like, no, I really fucking, I don't. Right. And he's like, well, how can you like Marx? I'm like, well, because fucking surprisingly, I agree with him about some things and disagree with him about others.
Mhm.
And then I was like, I'm not even sure that he really believed in the labor theory. It's a long story short, but it kind of occurred to me that the weird thing is that a lot of libertarians have this very narrow, cloistered view of what it means to be on the left and what it means to be a Marxist. And they keep kind of shove you into that box.
Yes.
So anyway, and they're like, no, but you must believe that because every Marxist believed that, and you like Marx, and they have no apprehension of the complexity and internal diversity of the left tradition. But anyway, long story short, I tweeted something out about that, and people were like, "Oh, so you're saying that all Marxists think the same?" That kind of shit, and it annoyed me a bit.
I'm going to give you a bit of advice that I heard from one of your rappers that you enjoy, Tyler the Creator.
Okay.
Apparently, when a friend was complaining about online harassment, Tyler the Creator walked up to him and then closed their laptop and said, "There, it's over."
Yes, good advice. Fucking. What though we could be so strong, right? No, yeah, you're right, right? And fucking, I'm not gonna lie. I went to London for a week to go hang out with a buddy of mine and present at a conference, and we had some beers and went to listen to some music. It was a good time, but I couldn't use my phone, and fucking, it was the most peaceful week of my life in a long time. So Tyler is right. Sometimes you just got to disconnect.
Brother, I'm trying to get our friend Burgess off the goddamn phone. I took all the social media off my phone.
Did you?
And I will scroll my bank statement because it's an addictive thing.
Yeah, it's for sure.
I have to like, I gotta, man, that charge went through, huh? It's insane how addictive those things are, and trying to get away from it has been extremely difficult because I do live a little bit of an isolated life. I can't speak for you. You live in Detroit. That's a proper city. You can go outside and tell someone to fuck off and all the other fun stuff you can do in a major city.
Hey, I gotta say, people are really nice here. I mean, if you're ever in Detroit, yeah, come hit me up and we'll get some beers and stuff. But it's a really great place. Know a lot of Americans think Detroit's got a bit of a mixed reputation, but very friendly people. Everybody will say hi to you when you're walking down the street. Great bars, great vibe. You know, really, really impressive place.
I think my first time there, I wouldn't call them hookers, some strippers tried to rob us. So I'm not in a hurry to go back.
Yeah, no, that would do it. That's how did you get robbed? Did you wait? Did they actually rob you, or did they try to rob you?
Oh, it was a setup. So we didn't know how segregated the strip clubs were. This was years. This was the first time I was like 2009. So we didn't know how segregated the strip clubs were, and we were in like Detroit Metro because we played a place called Blondie's. I don't even know if it's still around. It was actually like a real famous venue for the kind of music we were doing. But in 2009 was a year that another band that we knew got their entire trailer stolen.
Trailer? Wow.
So where cats would like bust open your van or your trailer, maybe steal a laptop if you left inside, or a phone, or maybe whatever gear you left in your thing, your car or trailer. Detroit was stealing your whole rig. They was taking off with your whole van.
Just taking your whole
whole shit. Like, you got to figure out and finish your fuck off, homie. And so at this point, we had 2 shows in Detroit at like weird different points of times in this tour. It was routed all funky. And so we were in a big massive RV towing a massive trailer. and all the venues in Detroit had, and Vancouver is like this too now. They had gates around it, and a security dude, a big security dude with a pistol, because you needed that, because they were going to steal your. It was just going to happen.
If they're willing to take your trailer, they'll take anything.
They're going to take your whole thing. So that was the tour. This is going to sound really bad, but I've lived a life. We were all kind of looking to find our wives on that tour in the worst places to find a spouse, probably. And we were like, we're in Detroit, let's find a strip club. And so we were just driving, and this is when Detroit was still like Detroit. Like, it wasn't nothing downtown. It was like Ford Field, and that was it.
Yeah. So like 8 Mile Detroit there.
Just what you saw in that. Yeah, like that, right? And so we go to the strip club, and we saw like black people there, and I, of course, I didn't have a problem with that. And the rest of the band seemed like, oh, this seems to be a lot of colored fellas out. I was like, oh, don't worry about it, guys. And we should have worried about it. And so we go to the strip club, and the singer of the band was like a pretty boy, and he had his shirt unbuttoned real low.
Yeah.
Like pretty boy low.
Yeah.
And as we were walking up, he was kind of like walking cool, and we had like tour laminates because we were like cool, right? And this black dude looked at him and was like, button up your shirt, little punk ass nigga. And then and the singer was like,
Scares the shit out of my man. What a story.
And that was the first one we went to, and he was like, Jay, I think we should just
yeah. No, that would scare the shit out of anybody, right? It's like, yeah, I'm not sure how welcome we are here, right?
Matt's over. People are so. Matt's like, people are so nice. He was like, I don't know, my first time in Detroit. So then we went to another club, and I won't get into it. It's more champagne room talk, but the night progressed, and it didn't get better.
Really? It just was all downhill from fucking some guy like, button up your fucking shirt, asshole. Yeah,
to this day, that image is burned into my head of that dude yelling that out of nowhere, and the dude just being real calm, like, well, okay, you don't have to yell it.
That's funny. Well, when I was living in Mexico, I got robbed a fair bit, right? Usually nothing all that serious, like, they'd take my phone. They stole my suit jacket once. I left it in my apartment, but somebody snuck into my apartment and took it. And that really pissed me off, because it was an expensive suit jacket, but it was probably the most expensive thing I had at that point. It was like $200. And I was like, fuck, like, I need that to go to a wedding. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? But one time I went with my wife. We were married at that point, and her best friend. He's gay, right? We went to a big gay club in Mexico City. And the reason I bring that up, A, is to add color, but the other reason is I got fairly drunk that night, and I was walking out of the bathroom, and this guy just grabs me by the ass and comes and kisses me, like right on the mouth, really kisses me. And my wife looks at this, and she's like, the hell are you doing? Like, what the fucking other stuff? I'm like, hey, listen, I didn't do any shit. And like, I push the guy off, and I walk out for a second, and she's like, you need to pay for these drinks. And I reach in, and my wallet's gone. And that would be bad enough. I mean, it was bad because I found out the next day that they had made like $2,000 worth of purchases on my credit card. Fortunately, my bank stopped it. But the worst thing, you probably know this, Jason, is they took my immigrant resident card.
Damn.
And it took me 8 months to get that back. And I kid you not, the day that I got it back, I never actually got it back, was because I was flying back to Canada because of COVID. And I got an email from them being like, we finally get sending you your card. And I was like, damn, that guy just caused me months and months of problems, because it's such a hassle to get that card back. They had to do an investigation, being like, you didn't photocopy it and sell it to someone else. I'm like, no.
You didn't photocopy it?
Yeah. I was like, no. I was just at a bar, and a guy kissed me and took my wallet, and that's how that happens.
I was at this gay bar, and the rent isn't going to pay itself. I had to I'm known as a bit of a Canadian twerker. They call me the Toronto twerker. That's my name.
Well, I think my wife would have been a lot angry at that. I mean, she was still pretty pissed off about that, both because of the kiss and also because my wallet was gone. But I was like, hey, it's not my fault, right? What are you supposed to do? Some guy ambushes you like that.
She must have been in a good mood, because she should have been, your wallet just happened to be missing, huh?
She wasn't bad. I mean, the number one thing is we were able to get back to the apartment. That was like number one ambition. But like where we were in Mexico City was like, do you know where Garibaldi's is? It's like really, really, really downtown. And our apartment was way, 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 way out in the suburbs. So like an hour away. So what we'd usually do is we take a taxi or an Uber back. It was quite expensive, but it was the only way to get there because you no fucking way you're gonna bus, right? But fortunately we got back and I just like passed right out being like, damn, tomorrow's gonna be just a terrible day, just an awful day, calling my bank, calling the government, calling Canadian embassy and all that stuff, being like that. So anyway, I won't wax more on about that story, right? But definitely I've never had anything as bad happen to me as my whole trailer.
Yeah, dude, you gotta watch out for
that's
and
another
it
level
was
of stuff.
scary because it was again, I'm not gonna get it, but this one is like, look, man, they're gonna shoot you and take your whole thing. That's what people do here. We're like, they're gonna do what to us? Detroit is too real. Like, fuck that. Fuck that. Detroit is too real. And then Ben was like, yeah, Matt McManus lives in Detroit. I was like, word?
Well, hey, listen, Ben came here with me.
Yeah.
Back in March, we presented Detroit DSA, or he presented Detroit DSA. It's a nice place. You know, give it another chance. I'm sure you'll like it.
I mean, I didn't hate it. I just was like, y'all, it's hard. Just too hard for me. I'm trying to chill out. I'm at a strip club and you got armed security guards.
Yeah.
Not what I'm trying to see.
Yeah, that'd be a little dark, wouldn't it? Right? You know, you're sitting there, you're trying to relax, you're trying to like enjoy the show, and then you just see some guy with a gun walking by you, a couple guys with guns. You're like, this
bulletproof
is really,
vest. That's why we after the dude yelled, we actually kind of walked in and we saw the dude with the bulletproof vest and the guns, and I said, "You need that here in a room full of pussy and joy?" And the man looked at me and goes, "Mm-hmm." And that's when we're like, yeah, let's just go.
We had the same problem when we went to, Acapulco in Mexico, right?
I've never been, but I know it, yeah.
It's really nice. We went there for our honeymoon, right? Because it wasn't all that expensive. Very, very nice, beautiful beach. You know, you could get a margarita and walk around and be kind of like, in a daze for most of the day and nobody would mind. But like, there's this very tiny strip in front of the beach where we would go and we would stay. And it's very nice. You know, we were staying in a nice-ish place. But like right off the strip, there were these military cars, guys in military garb, guns, machine guns, all this kind of stuff. And I asked Miriam once, I'm like, why is all that there? And she's like, well, Acapulco is like one of the most dangerous places in the entire world. Like you just go right off of the strip and drugs, gangs, all that kind of stuff.
Really?
Yeah. No, I didn't know that. And I was like, Mexico generally is a fairly safe place, right? But, there's some parts of it that are dangerous. And I was like, man, this is just really making it a lot harder to relax. Because when I'm walking down the street with a margarita and there's just a guy who comes by on like a military Jeep and then got the guys with the, gear on and machine guns and all that stuff, it kind of cuts my vibe a little bit.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable in Mexico, and I've walked around in some, what some people would call sketchy areas at various hours of the night and not really worried about my safety. But then there's some areas of town and you hear their names and you're like, that name isn't even effing around. Like this dude, again, I won't get into the whole story, but a friend of mine and I were walking around and he met this young lady and he like left where we were to go hang out with us. And he came back kind of with a like, what? Look on his face. And he's like, dude, she took me to Murder Alley. I was like, she took you to where? There's a place called what?
Yeah. Don't go there.
Like,
yeah, my wife always gave me a good suggestion with that. I lived in Mexico for quite a long time, and like I'd wander around at every point of the night, partly because I'm Canadian. I was just like, I'm not going to be fucking hemmed in, right? But also just because it's a nice place and good people and nice vibes, right? But the number one rule that they always told me, my father-in-law told me this, my wife told me this, everybody was like, listen, if we don't go to a place, 100% you don't belong in that place. you stay away from that. And I listened to that advice as much as I could, and it served me very well because I never saw anything that was all that bad, but yeah, definitely there's some areas where they're like, yeah, don't go there. That's not a place for anybody, and certainly not a migrant.
Hey, man walks in like the kids from Degrassi. What's on the boot?
How y'all doing?
Someone says Matt looks like Super Gringo.
Well, that was the other thing too, because I was really poor when I was living in Mexico, right? I didn't have a lot of money, but people thought I had money. So Marion was like, "Man, you're gonna get marked so easy because everyone thinks you're rich." I'm like, "Well, if they want the fucking $20 in my bank account right now, oh, they can even just have it, right? What am I supposed to do, with that?" But yeah, so I try my best not to go where I didn't belong. Let's just put it that way.
Well, look, wherever you guys are watching or listening to the show, there is a link in the description to Matt's new book, Liberal. It's got a longer title, Liberal Socialism.
The Political Theory of Liberal Socialism, which is an homage to C.B. Macpherson, the great Canadian political theorist who wrote a book called The Political Theory of Possessive Individualism. So, an homage is just plagiarism that's done respectfully. So that's what I did.
Before we go, you did mention someone in your book that I didn't know about, Charles Mills.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Charles Mills before we go?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, Charles Mills, self-identified black radical liberal, started off his career as a Marxist, writing in the kind of Marxist anti-colonialist tradition. Like a lot of people, he kind of shifted a little bit in the 1990s when it seemed like Marxism was a dead end, although he never lost some of the inspiration. But probably his most famous book is a work called The Racial Contract, which everyone should read. And the kind of core argument of this book is a lot of more centrist liberals tend to treat the racism of people like Locke or Kant as peripheral to their political worldview. And you see this all the time, right? The founding fathers were racist and had racist views, but that says nothing about the principles that they espoused or the society that they built. It was just kind of a bad quality that they had or some bad opinions that they happen to have. And what Mills does very successfully in the Racial Contract is say, no, actually, racism was in many ways central to the classical liberal worldview, or the worldview, I should say, of classical liberals. And they baked a lot of these racial presuppositions into their political philosophies and into their social policies. So he says that a better way of understanding the kind of society that many of the classical liberals, including the founding fathers, wanted to build was not a full democracy, but rather what he calls a Herrenvolk democracy, one where whites would be entitled to democratic agency and democratic rights, political participation, and racialized minorities, of course, would be entitled to none of that. And it's a very convincing and very interesting book. Really well written, very sharp also. But one of the things that I point out about Mills is despite these very fierce and very justifiable criticisms of the liberal tradition, like I was saying, he always thought that there was a moral core to liberalism that was worth redeeming, which is why he called himself a black radical liberal at the end of his life, who was also committed to many socialist reforms. And it's quite a shame, actually. He was just in the process of developing a kind of more systematic account of his black radical liberalism in a variety of different articles. And then he died relatively young at the age of 70. So we really don't know what the kind of full sketch of his philosophy would have looked like, because he was just kind of teasing it out. But a great guy, and leaves us with a project that is very much worth fulfilling if anybody wants to take up that challenge.
His name is Matt McManus. His new book is called Liberal Socialism. Again, wherever you are watching or listening to this show, there's a link in the description. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Maybe I can come on your show and we can talk music.
Absolutely, man. Hey, if you ever want to just chat music, I'm always down for that, right? Everybody only wants to talk to me about politics. Music's a lot more fun and a lot more uplifting in a lot of ways.
We can have a conversation on why the 2 Load records are important records in the Metallica canon.
Well, I don't know. Like I said, I got strong feelings about that. So we'll save that for another time.
Again, yes. I'll go on your show. We'll have and I'll blow your mind about those 2 records and why they're important.
I'm don't want to say I'm open to be convinced. I'll listen. How about that? I'll listen, and I'll listen respectfully, and then we'll see where the night takes us.
Thank you very much, Matt. And for patrons of the show, I will be in the Champagne Room with M. Toussaint. We'll be dicking around, talking a little bit of shit about relationships, Australian breakdancers, and why I think that woman actually can dance. She was actually trolling. And maybe I'll tell you the end of the Tubi movie I watched. Matt, do you watch movies on Tubi?
No, right now the only thing that I'm watching is The Boys. I never watched it back when it was released, and now I've been catching up with Marion over the weeks. It's really good.
It's a good show. Yeah, it's way better than I thought it was. I just started watching that too, but dude, check out some of these movies on Tubi. They're amazing.
Well, send me the link. I'll take a look at it. Right, I got a week off next week, so plan is to relax.
All right, thank you guys, and we are out.
Take care.